morning. Welcome to the podcast. Glad that you are with us today. We are in full swing of school and sports and everything else. I bet you are too. I hope that you are having a great start to the school year. Last night we were at a volleyball game that our girls played, and it was a super stressful game.
Oh my gosh. Every set they had was like within points.
Yeah. And it was just like you score 11 points, we score 11 points. 12 points, 12 points. And it just went back and forth, and they had to work so hard for every point, but they came out with the win. And so it was awesome. But we got home really late, and we ate dinner in the car out of our cooler. It's just like one of those seasons in our life, volleyball season. And I bet you guys have a lot of seasons like that as well with sports and everything. But today we're kind of talking about parenting, actually. And we are definitely in the thick of parenting right now.
Well, and I'm glad our girls do one sport. So they all do volleyball. They all play for the same school. And so the games are at the same place. I don't know how you parents do it, that you have your kids in multiple things, even at multiple times, because just one is like, that's enough.
It's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot. And we love volleyball season, but we're also always happy when it's over.
That's what I was going to say. It is nice while it's going on, but man, when it's done, it's like, oh, we can have our own lives again.
Yeah. So we feel for those of you who are dealing with the same thing. But today we're going to answer your parenting questions. We've had a lot of really good questions come in. So we're excited for this episode. We hope you are too, and enjoy watching the recording of it.
So if you have some questions, put them right there in the comments, and we'll get to your questions as well. All right, love, you ready?
I'm ready.
Gather round, everybody. It's time for a family meeting. The Family Meeting is a show that's all about family relationships. We're the Osterkamps. I'm Thomas, and this is my wife, Lysandra.
Hello, and welcome to our family. Welcome to episode 206 of the Family Meeting podcast. On today's episode, we are going to answer your parenting questions. So we've had a lot of really great questions come in, and we wanted to share them with the rest of you, because a lot of times what happens is we are all wondering the same thing, but a lot of times we don't have the courage to ask the question. We don't want to seem like we don't know the answer. We kind of have that pride. And so when somebody asks a question, it can be such a blessing to other people too, because most likely other people have that exact same question.
Yeah, and we did this, we did a family conference up with our friends at Elyria Church. And one of the things we do when we do a marriage or parenting conference is we have a number that people can text to anonymously put in their questions. And so we had so many questions come in, though, for that conference that we could not answer them all because of time's sake. So we thought it'd make a great podcast episode because a lot of you might have the exact same questions. But before we jump into that, I want to remind you of our free webinar that we're having September 26th at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. And we're going to be talking about guiding your kids through social media. Now, that webinar is normally $19.99, but for all of our listeners, we are giving it away for free. You simply have to put in the code Family Meeting, all one word, Family Meeting, and you get $19.99 right off the top, brings it down to zero. So we'll be talking about social media and your kids.
Sounds great. It's definitely a relevant conversation right now. Okay, so let's get into our first question today. Where do you start, other than the Bible, with being a good parent when you yourself did not have good parents? And this is such a great question. I think a lot of times as we talk about parenting, we just imply that people came from a good home where their parents were involved and unabusive and just good people. And that's not always the case, unfortunately. There are a lot of really difficult situations that people are being raised in, and then they have children and are trying to raise their children.
Well, I think even if you did come from what you would call a good home, all of us as parents are trying to do what we think is a better job than our parents did. which means we're stepping out into territory that we don't know anything about. So for all of us, we're trying to do things maybe a little bit differently, try to change some things up. And so no matter where you are on your parenting journey, then hey, you're often stepping out in the unknown. Mm-hmm. Most of us have no idea what we're doing when they say, hey, here's your boy, here's your girl. Nobody ever told us here's your boy, but
no.
Here's your daughter. Like, and you remember that first one, and it's just like, are they really going to let me go home with this person?
Yep. Yeah. It's crazy that I don't know. It feels like there should be more training before you leave the hospital with a baby.
Yeah.
And there's just barely anything. There's really no training. Like,
they're like, hey, do you have a car seat? Yes. All right, you can take this kid home. You're good to go.
That's all you need is that car seat. Well, like, we both had lots of experience with babies. You with your little brother, Jonathan, and me with like my cousins, but also I did a lot of babysitting and stuff. So I was very comfortable with babies. But people who aren't, like, who tells them how to change a diaper? Like, who, I don't know. There's not a lot of training that goes into it. It's rough.
No.
But I think a lot of us, even if we did have really good parents, we are also trying to maybe change like one aspect of what our parents did, or we're trying to overcome maybe a bad habit that we've seen from our parents, even if they were really good parents. So whether you had good parents or not, it can be really difficult. So the real question, though, is where do you start with being a good parent? And of course, the first thing that we would point to is the Bible, but they say other than the Bible. They're like, they don't want the cliche answer, the Bible. And so we recommend, though, things like podcasts like this, and there's YouTube channels and all kinds of, there's so many resources right now. More than ever before in the world. And so there's so many opportunities for growth through other areas. However, be really careful because there is a lot of bad advice as well.
Well, and one of our favorite resources is called Parenting, Getting It Right by Andy and Sandra Stanley. Fantastic book. They also have a study guide that includes streaming video. And so there's little videos to watch and a guide, but it's a resource that I wish we would have had when we first started having kids. There were things, we had teenagers at that point when it came out, and it was just like, oh, that was really helpful. I wish we would have known that. I wish we would have had that. So one of the best places to start is Parenting, Getting It Right. Mm-hmm. I think another thing that you can do is just to sit down and literally just make a list of, hey, what kind of parent do I want to be? What do I think is the right kind of parent? What kind of qualities do they have? What are the things that they do? What are the things that they avoid? What are things that they absolutely will not do, will not say? And just kind of setting this, I don't know if you want to call it character, but getting this kind of character right and then working to become that. Now, obviously, we believe that Scripture is the ultimate resource and the ultimate guide of what a parent ought to be and how we get those character qualities and all of that stuff. But if you just kind of sit down and map it out, then that will help you become the person you want to become. If you say, I think that being a good parent means we have dinner at the table every night. Okay, then, all right, how are you going to develop a plan to be able to do that?
Yeah.
And we have some good friends of ours, Mike and Dale Tucker, who that was something that was very important to them as a family. And so they had multiple kids in multiple sports. Yeah. And so they developed a plan like, okay, look at everybody's schedule. This night, we're all eating dinner at 4:30, sitting around the table. Yep. And tomorrow night, it's going to be 10 p.m. But that was a core principle for them of what they wanted to be as good parents. And so that's a big part of it, is knowing what you think a good parent ought to be and then developing a plan to be able to do that. So
Yeah.
I think that's helpful.
I believe strongly in surrounding yourself with other good parents. So when you see parents who appear to be doing it right, you see that their kids are turning out well, and it obviously we all have problems and there's always things under the surface. But if you can find people who treat their kids well, who love one another, and they're doing it well, spend time with them, interact with them, ask them questions, learn from them. There's a lot of wisdom in learning from other people. So, all right, let's go on to our next question.
All right, here's the next question. What steps can you take when you're stuck in the shame of your parenting mistakes? And I feel some sorrow for this person. I don't know who this is, because once again, these were sent in anonymously. But what I do want to tell this person, first of all, is that we all make mistakes. So when you think about who you think the best parents in the world are, whether it's somebody you actually know, whether it's you see somebody from a distance, whether it's, hey, you're listening to a podcast and you think those two right there, like they've got it all figured out.
You're wrong.
You are wrong. We all make mistakes.
Yeah.
Like, we don't do everything right as parents. Now, obviously, I don't know what the mistake is they're referencing or the mistakes that they're dealing with. But one of the things that we always encourage people to do is just own your mistakes. First of all, just own it. Don't pretend like it didn't happen, like you didn't make the mistakes. Don't go on just like ignoring it. If you know what the mistakes are, your kids know what the mistakes are, your spouse knows what the mistakes are, just own it. And so you start with that. Start with apologizing for whatever it is. And we'll just kind of continue on with this dinner thing, having dinner as a family.
Okay.
Say you haven't made time to have dinner with the family, or like for us, it's often coffee or breakfast or something like that. But you just haven't made time for the family. You put work first, you put hobbies first, you put whatever first. Just own it and apologize. Listen, I'm sorry I put my work in front of spending time with you. I apologize. And once you apologize, all right, then talk about what are we going to do to change? How are we going to change this? We're not just going to repeat the same pattern. We want to develop a plan of how to make some changes. And so whether that's, hey, I'm going to at 5:00, I'm just going to turn my phone off for a couple hours or the rest of the night or whatever it is. You start to set these parameters. At 5:00, I'm shutting my phone off and I'm going to start making dinner, or we're going to make dinner together as a family, or however you want to do it. But we're developing a plan now of what we're going to do. And then one of the things that Lysandra and I do is we give, whether it's our kids or whether it's us as spouses, we give the people in our lives permission to hold us accountable. If I don't stick to what the plan is, I want you to bring it up to me. I want you to have this conversation. I want you to remind me. And so developing that kind of plan is kind of where I would start. What would you add to that conversation? I can think of a couple of things I'd like to say, but I want to give you the opportunity to jump in.
I agree with everything you just said as far as owning it and apologizing, and then take the steps to change. But a lot of times, even after you do all of that, the shame lingers and you just can't get over the mistakes that you made. And there's a lot of mistakes and a wide range of mistakes. Some can be really, really horrific and have long-lasting consequences, and others can be more simple with a quick fix. But as you think about shame, one thing that I do want to mention is Psalms 34, 4 and 5. It says, "I sought the Lord, and he answered me and delivered me from all my fears. Those who look to him are radiant, and their faces shall never be ashamed." And so what I would recommend you do as you're dealing with the shame of parenting mistakes is seek the Lord, go to him, share with him your fears, your shame, everything from your past. And I think a lot of times the fear that comes in is my children will never forgive me. They're not going to turn out right because of what I did. They're never going to get over this or forget this. And that brings a lot of fear, and it brings the shame. But as you look to God and you go to him for the help, he's going to help you get over that shame. Like, give the shame to him. Just offer it to him. And you can you can do this very literally and just hold your hands out. Get down on your knees and just hold out the shame to God and list it. Mm-hmm. List the things to him that you are ashamed of from your past parenting mistakes. Tell him exactly how you feel about it and give it to him. He will take it. It says, I sought the Lord, he answered me and delivered me from all my fears. And when we look to the Lord, our faces will never be ashamed. So just give that shame to him. He can help you with that.
And I think along with that, understanding this wonderful promise that comes in 1 John 1:9 says, if we confess our sins, he, that's speaking about God, is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. So whatever the mistakes that we made in the past, we can go to God, as Lysandra talked about, and we can find forgiveness. We can find cleansing. We can find a brand new start. And if we are followers of Jesus, we lead a church here in Palm Coast, Florida. And so one of the things that we know and understand about our faith is that Jesus died to take our shame, to take our guilt. He suffered the wrath of God in our place. So I don't have to bear that. You don't have to bear that. If we've confessed it, we've forsaken it, then we have forgiveness and we have a brand new start. And we need to stop letting the enemy hold that guilt and shame over us. And part of that process is to replace that shame and guilt with right thinking. The enemy tries to throw that in our face time and time again. No, I've already dealt with that. I've already apologized to my kids, to my husband. I've already went to God about it. I have found forgiveness and restoration from God, from the people in my life. I have developed this plan to change my behavior. We're taking steps forward. I'm not going to let the enemy pull me back and hold me down. I'm going to think about the things that are true and right and lovely. And, that's part of the process. Now, we've condensed all that down to a 5 to 7 minute answer, but it takes time. Yeah. It takes a lot of time to get over those things, to let that shame and that guilt go. But it's one day at a time, one interaction at a time, one step at a time. And before you know it, as you look back over the months and years, you can see how you've gotten past those things. But it does take time. That's right. Especially depending upon what it is. It's going to be a trust building process every day. Just, hey, making those changes you need to make.
All right. So let's look at our next question. This person says, yelling is the only way they will listen. I feel like there are some parents out there who are like, yeah, for real. A lot of people are relating to this.
There's some husbands like that could apply to.
Yeah, or wives. Okay, then here comes the question. Why is it so bad to yell, and how do I stop doing it? How do I stop yelling? Really good question. So I'll share a quick story about my yelling, because I remember this one mom. She was very sweet, but we were having a Bible study, and she was talking about how she was struggling with yelling at her kids. And I was listening, and she looked at me and she goes, I just want to be more like you. You never yell at your kids. And I just laughed out loud. Like, I was like, you really think that?
If you only knew, like
Yeah.
every parent
yells at their kids at some point.
Yeah,
like, it's
from
not
time
good,
to
but
time,
We do
but
it.
yeah.
yeah. So I'm not like I don't yell all the time or anything, and I try not to yell, but I have yelled at my kids. Yeah, absolutely. And so I immediately told her, yes, I do yell at my kids. I very rarely ever yell in front of other people at my kids. I'm a lot more controlled when other people are around, of course.
Yeah. Most of us are.
Yeah, but I don't want to yell at my kids even when nobody's around. So I'll tell you this story. This happened when the girls were young. We have 4 daughters, for those of you who don't know, and they're all very close in age. And I homeschooled all of them. So we're all around the dining room table. Everyone's doing their different subjects in their different grades. And I'm kind of walking around the dining room table, like helping this kid. Okay, then you're going to do this, reading these instructions, going around. And it's very stressful to homeschool for those of you who don't. It's really stressful. Those of you who do, you understand. And it's terrible. Homeschooling is terrible. Like, it's so worth it and it's so terrible. But anyway, so I was having trouble getting the kids to do what they were supposed to do. I don't want to do math. I don't, whatever, just
They
fighting.
still don't want to do math, by the way.
We still did fight on this, but they're fighting me on doing their work. And I just lost it. Like, I was so sick of it because it's every single day. And I lost it. And I just screamed at the table at all of my daughters. Just do your work. I can't even remember exactly what I said, but I was like, knock it off and just obey. It doesn't matter if you want to do your work, you obey because it's the right thing to do. You have to do your school. I'm like, just yell at them. I just lose it on my kids. They all just sat up with big eyes and were like terrified of me, this monster that was before them.
Well, for one thing, it's startling because you would very rarely raise your voice.
Yeah, very rarely.
Never
What
mind
happened,
just like full blown yell at them.
Yeah. Like, I lost my temper. And they all straightened up and were shocked and right away just grabbed their pencils and just started writing. I mean, they're just doing their work. So scary. And in my mind, I'm like, oh,
this works.
that worked really well. So guess what I did later that day and the next day and the day after that? I started yelling. And so pretty soon I realized I had developed a pattern where now I'm yelling every day during our homeschooling. And this is one thing about yelling. If you're a yeller, you know this to be true. The more you yell, the less effective it is. So my kids started getting used to that. I hate even saying that, but they got used to me yelling. Oh, I feel bad about that. Talking about your shame of your parenting mistakes. And so I had to, like, the Lord dealt with me. I cannot remember if it was a sermon or my private devotions or just the Holy Spirit in the midst of my yelling, but I knew I had to stop this behavior. It was wrong. It worked at first, so it was tempting to follow it. But it stopped being as effective, and now I'm just indulging in my fleshly desires, which is just to, like, let loose on my kids. So I had to stop. I had to apologize to my kids, and I had to tell them, I'm not going to yell anymore. I might make a mistake, and if I do, I'm going to apologize. I'm going to try not to yell anymore. But I'm telling you that I'm promising you that I am working on not yelling. I told my husband, I've been yelling at the kids. You're at work. I'm at home homeschooling. It's been really bad. I'm working to not yell. I need you to tell me if you catch me yelling at the kids. And so for me, the way to stop it was, of course, I had to deal with it with the Lord and confess my sin to him and ask him for help. But then I also had to acknowledge it to my family so that it's no longer like the elephant in the room. I put it out there. Like, I know this has been happening. We all know it's been happening, and I'm not going to do it anymore. So when you tell your family you're not going to do this thing anymore, the next time you do it, everybody's like, oh, you did it. You said you weren't going to do it. And so, like, there's this accountability that happens, right?
Yeah.
So it's really important to tell your family the thing that you're trying to correct. And in this case, it's yelling. So that would be my first thoughts. Thomas, what are your thoughts?
Well, a couple of things. So, for one thing, some of it has to do with the way we were raised, right? Depending on the home and the background you were growing up in. And I think this could take us back to the first question as well, is, thinking about the example that you had in front of you. What kind of parent do you want to be? What do you think a good parent is? I would probably say that most people, if we're going to write down the things that a good parent is and a good parent is not, I don't think anybody is putting a good parent yells all the time, right? And so that's not on the list of what we think of when we think of what a good parent is. So really, it doesn't matter what your background is. Now, if that has been your normal, that's kind of a pattern that you'll easily just fall into, right? And so we've talked about this on the podcast before, whether it's me talking to the kids or just me having interactions with Lysandra. I wouldn't call it yelling, but I would be talking loudly and passionately. And for Lysandra, she took that as like yelling. Why are you yelling at me? Why are you yelling about this? Why are you yelling at the kids? And I'm like, well, this is just the way we often communicated in our home. And so working to kind of recognize that pattern, and trying to change it. But I also think of this, when the question is asked, yelling is the only way they will listen. So that is how the question was started. Why is it so bad, and how do I stop? And so, if yelling is the only way they will listen in your home, then that means that your kids don't take what you say seriously. It probably means when you say it the first time or the first couple of times, they don't take it seriously because you've said it, whatever it is. Lysandra brought up the kids doing their schoolwork. And every parent has to do this, whether you homeschool or not. Like your kids have homework and everything else, or they've got chores. But it's like if we say, hey, go clean your room, and hey, they know by the tone, I'm going to say it again and again and again until finally mom yells or dad yells, and then I know they're serious. So one of the things that we have to stop doing is we've got to stop repeating ourselves over and over and over again, and we've got to tell our kids, hey, go clean your room. If you don't, these are the repercussions. And then when they don't,
right,
just mete out what those repercussions are, whatever they are. It's like we have a situation here sometimes. Our kids, because Lysandra and I both work outside of the home, and our kids are older now, between the ages of 18 and very soon 14, just a couple weeks. They're responsible for certain things around here. In fact, a lot of times Lysandra and I aren't even here to eat. So the girls are making their own meals and everything else. And if we have been painting all day, we come home to a kitchen full of dirty dishes. That's not cool. And we've talked to our kids before about it. Like, you've got to clean up after yourself. And so there are certain things where if I come home and the dishes aren't done, I'll just tell the girls. If the dishes aren't done by the time you're ready to go to volleyball practice or your game, you're not going.
Right.
And if I say that, I've got to mean it.
That's right. You will have to actually follow through on that.
I've got to follow through with it. Now, my girls, because of the interactions we've had, my girls know I will follow through.
Yeah.
So I have a pattern of following through. If I say that these are the repercussions, they're going to be the repercussions. But if you're used to just saying something and then repeating yourself until you finally yell, your kids learn the pattern.
Yep.
So they know, and we've been around parents like this, where the kids know until mom yells, she doesn't mean it. She doesn't really mean it until she yells. Until dad raises his voice, he doesn't really mean it. So what you've got to do is you've got to help your kids to learn the new pattern. Is it's not when I yell I mean it, it's when I say it I mean it. And so if you tell them, hey, go clean your room, and they don't do it, how much ever time has passed, whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever. Hey, didn't I tell you to go clean your room? Yes. Did you hear me tell you to clean your room? Yes. Okay. What did I say was going to happen if you didn't go clean your room? Whatever that is. No screen time, no phone, no whatever. Okay. Like, give me your phone.
Yep.
I'm taking your phone away right now. And you just heard how I would say it. I'd say it exactly the way that I'm talking to you in the microphone right now. I don't need to raise my voice. I don't need to yell. It's just, hey, I said it and I meant it. And so we've got to retrain our kids to understand that when mom says something, when dad says something, they mean it. I need to act upon that.
That's right. And let me just go back to one of the parts of the question that says, why is yelling so bad? Because we've talked about how to stop it. We've talked about, the first part there about yelling is the only way that they'll listen. But why is yelling so bad? Is there a context when yelling is fine and it's okay? So I don't believe that yelling is okay. And here's one thing that I want you to think about with yelling. And if you've ever had a job and you've had a boss, how would you feel and how would you respond if your boss just like yelled at you? I'm talking about like screaming at you. How would you respond? How would you feel? I know me personally, I'd be looking for an apology. And if I didn't get one and this behavior continued, I would be looking for another job immediately. Like, I'm not going to put myself under someone who yells at me.
Well, and even take that out further. Just think of any other adult in your life, whether it's a neighbor, anybody. Like, if they just yell at you all the time, we would think this is an unhealthy person.
Absolutely.
This is somebody I don't want to spend time with. I don't want to be around. Why? Because we understand that's not an appropriate way for us to talk to each other. And so if it's not appropriate for you to yell at your neighbor all the time or him to yell at you, why do we have this in our mind that it's okay as a parent for me to yell at my kids all the time?
Right. Yeah. It's just not okay. And then here's a scripture verse that there's so many in the Bible that talk about speech and how we talk to people. We're going to share just a couple today, but Ephesians 4:29 says, let no corrupt talk come out of your mouths. Nothing corrupt, but only such as good as for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. So your words should build up. If they aren't building up, then the opposite of that is tearing down. Yelling tears down. Yelling makes you feel bad. Yelling is nasty. It's uncomfortable. You think about the way you feel when someone yells at you. There are a lot of things that happen in your body. Your heart rate goes up. You probably, sometimes my fingertips will get numb if I'm being yelled at. I mean, I have like a physical response to being yelled at. It tears down. It does not build up. Your speech should have no corruption, and it should be only for building up. It should be appropriate to the occasion, and it should administer grace to people who are listening. That's kind of the checklist for your speech, including to your children. So yelling it just doesn't match up. It's just out.
Well, and I can think of only one instance where it would be okay to yell at somebody, whether it's somebody you know, don't know, your kids, or whatever else. In Lysandra, you let me know if you can think of another occasion. But as far as I can think of, the only proper occasion if somebody is in like actual danger.
Danger. Yep. That's what I was going to say. Danger.
And it's like,
that's the only reason.
There's been times where our kids were small and we lived on a very busy road and they go running for the road. And what would we do? We'd scream at them like, stop, come here. Why? Because their physical life is in danger.
Right. But as that verse says, that fits the occasion.
Exactly.
That fits the occasion. We're trying to protect them from literal death.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the only occasion when yelling is okay.
And that's such a great verse that you brought out about no corrupt talk, because that word corrupt is the idea of tearing down. Mm-hmm. And so rather than tearing down, we need to build up. And then Lysandra looked up this verse here, and I think it's such a great verse and something that really we all need to be more mindful of. In Colossians 4:6. It says, let your speech always be gracious.
Gracious. Wow.
And the idea of filled with grace. And what is grace? Grace is good things that we don't deserve. You say, but my kids are being brats right now. They deserve for me to yell at them. That may be true.
Yeah, they definitely are being brats.
That
we get it.
may be true. But as a follower of Jesus, hey, our words are supposed to be filled with grace. Mm-hmm. And so they may deserve for me to yell at them. But instead, I'm going to speak words of grace. Now, that doesn't mean I don't speak the truth, and it doesn't mean I don't follow through with what I said I was going to do with the repercussions, but it ought to be full of grace. And it says this, season with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person. And so it's literally learning how to communicate properly in every situation. That's what our words ought to be. And so if yelling is the default, it's time to change our default. Mm-hmm. And a big part of that is probably, as we mentioned, making sure that our kids know when I say something, I mean it, and I'm going to follow through with it.
So one of the things that we talk about often on our podcast and often when we go to speaking engagements and conferences is making sure that your kids understand the why. Not just your kids, but even your spouse, making sure your spouse understands the why. For instance, if I tell Thomas that I really need the garage cleaned, and we talk about this all the time because we actually have an issue with our garage all the time. There's a lot happening out there. But if I tell him that I need the garage cleaned, it's not just about needing the garage cleaned. I want him to know why.
She needs it clean for her own sanity.
It's about my emotional
peace of
health.
mind, yes.
And it's also about being able to more quickly find the thing I need so I can hurry up and get to the appointments that I have.
Whether it's church or a paint job or whatever else.
Yeah, and it's all in the garage. That's our storage. So if he understands the why, he's more likely to understand why I need the help, and he will then be able to do it, right? And we believe in sharing with our children the why. Why do we say this? Why is this important? Why do you have to do this? I think it makes it easier for them to obey, and it helps so that they don't have resentment toward the rules, right?
Well, and I don't want people to think that our kids shouldn't obey just because I said so. Mm-hmm. Because the scripture is very clear, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. So they ought to obey just because we said. But we're trying to raise our kids to be able to think and understand logically and make good choices and all of those sorts of things. And part of that process is explaining the reasoning behind why we say this or why we don't let them do this. Why do we set up these boundaries and these rules? Is so that they can learn to think critically and logically for themselves. We're not just trying to get them to obey. We're not raising little robots here. Mm-hmm. This is, not some sort of like android factory like you'll see in some sci-fi show or whatever else, or what the Clone Wars or whatever in Star Wars, where they've got all these little robots.
Yeah.
We want our kids to be able to think logically, think critically, to understand the reasoning behind. So as they go and are starting to grow and mature, like I mentioned, we've got between 18 and 14. So literally in just a couple of years, I'm going to bring this up, Lysandra, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to make you cry or feel any sort of way. But the bottom line is, in the next few years, all our kids could be out on their own. And we want them to be equipped to do that, to make an impact in this world, and to establish their own families, and not just, hey, well, these are rules my parents made, so this is the rules I have. Like, no, why do you have those rules? Mm-hmm.
So the question is, why is there a problem with wanting your child to obey just because I said so? And so in a way, Thomas did answer that. It's not wrong to want your child to obey just because you said so, maybe here and there, but it's really good for them to be able to think critically, because there's a lot of really, really bad things that have come and movements that have come from people just following blindly.
Yeah.
And just obeying because the leader said to do this. So whether it's their boss at work in the future, whether it is their religious leader, we want our kids not to just blindly obey. We do want them to understand like the process behind why they're being told to do the thing they're being told to do. And it's okay for your child to ask questions. And it's great. We did teach our children, obey because you're told to do this thing. And I'm your dad, I'm your mom, you're supposed to obey. And we absolutely did that. We had those conversations with our kids. However, we find it is much easier for our children to obey when they understand the why.
Yeah.
And it's okay for it to be easy for them to obey. We're not trying to get them to obey, on purpose and make it hard for them to obey on purpose. That is definitely going to get you a lot of rebellion. If you are purposefully trying to make it hard for your child to obey, you're going to get disobedience, or you're going to get obedience with resentment and rebellion. So explaining the why is going to help you in your parenting. So I wouldn't say there's a problem with wanting your child to obey just because I said so. I just think it's really dangerous to say, like, because I'm dad or because I'm mom.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a dangerous reason.
Well, and if you don't personally know the why and can explain it in such a way that your child can understand, maybe you need to rethink why you want them to do this or that. Why have you set up these rules and these boundaries? Because if you don't know, what are you doing it for?
Just stop making that rule. If there's not a good reason behind it. And that's the thing too, when you have to explain the why, it's making you think through your own rules.
Yeah.
And there are times when we've done this and my kids have literally said, "Oh, why are we doing that?" And I'm like, I don't really know. I don't have a good reason. Let's not do it.
But you ought to be able to explain it to your child in such a way they can understand. So if you've got very small children, you've got toddlers, you may explain it in a different way. The whys may be explained differently than if they're teenagers, right? So your toddler may have a question of, hey, how come I can't just go with Mr. Whatever alone in a car or whatever? Probably as a toddler, they're not going to ask that question, but just
mature toddler.
Just to kind of help you understand the explanation behind it. It's to keep you safe. Like that's as much information as they need at that point. Now, as they're older and as teenagers, you're going to go into more depth about that safety and what that actually looks like. And these are conversations we have with our girls all the time. So how you explain it is going to be different based upon the age of your child and what they can kind of understand and take, but you ought to know it for yourself. All right, next question here. What if I didn't make the Bible important until recently and my child is already older?
Great question.
And part of this, I think, can go back to the first question we had about mistakes and whatever else. Anytime you acknowledge something that you're like, you know what, I probably should have done this earlier. Probably should have made, the Bible a more important part. Now, I don't know this person. I don't know if they were a Christian their child's entire life. I don't know if they recently became a Christian and their child's already older. And so one of the things we do is just, once again, hey, you know what? I apologize. I didn't make this a priority and I shouldn't. So there are two different, depending on where you're at as a parent, and your faith walk, you might have two different conversations with your kid. So if I've been a follower of Jesus the whole time of my child's entire life and I've not made the Bible a priority, I'm apologizing for that. I'm saying, hey, I want to change. I want to be a better follower of Jesus. I want to help you become a better follower of Jesus. So I want to make sure we're having Bible time together. I want to help you establish your own time in the Bible on your own and kind of following through with that. But if you've recently become a follower of Jesus and your child's already older, that's a totally different conversation. Like, hey, I found Jesus. I want to learn to walk with him. I want to be close to him. Part of that is knowing who he is, what he wants for my life, and all the sorts of things. And that's found in the Bible. And I'm really excited about it. And I want to help you with this too. And so I would like to start doing this. But here's the thing. Whatever it is, it's just start now.
Yeah.
Start fresh now. Whatever happened in the past is over. You can't do anything about it except for maybe own it and apologize and change. But you can start to make it a priority today. And I would say this. I probably wouldn't start with, hey, we're going to read in the Bible for an hour together every day. It's, hey, let's get on a family plan. And every morning we're each on our own going to read the little devotional, and then we're going to come together, we're going to talk about it. So it's just starting small. It may be just a verse a day, but you're helping them develop and build a habit. But start today. Whatever happened in the past, start today fresh. What do you think about that, and what would you add?
I have nothing to add. I agree with what you said. I would have said the same thing.
That is a first.
Yeah, right.
Write it down. She said, I got it. I did it.
Yeah. All right, next question. How often do you have family meetings? Now, we are the Family Meeting Podcast, so that makes it sound like we always have family meetings.
We do at least once a week.
Yeah, on our podcast. So family meetings is what we call when we gather together. For you, it might look like dinner time around the table where you have a discussion. It looks very different for us in different seasons and different days even. So our family meetings consist of spending time together without phones, talking, and typically having some sort of biblical focus or discussion during the family meeting. And the question here is, how often do you have family meetings? And I understand why someone's asking this, because you're struggling having family meetings every day. And you look at someone like the Osterkamps who have a podcast called Family Meeting, and you think, oh, they have family meetings every day. They're so good.
And you're wrong. We have it twice a day.
Ha ha ha. There are days that we miss. Now, we pretty much have morning coffee every day at 7 a.m. As a family. When the kids were little, and we were just talking about this the other day, when the kids were little, we would have dinner time every evening, almost every evening. And we would sit at the dining room table and we would read the Bible, or we would have a discussion. That's just not practical for us now. The kids are older. They're going in different directions. Like I was telling our YouTube before we started recording the podcast, we had dinner last night in the car from a cooler after the volleyball game on the way home.
At like 10 o'clock at night.
10 o'clock at night. That was our dinner time. So that's how our life is right now. That's our season. So for us, mornings are better because before this one goes off to college classes and these two start their other classes, before we go to work, before we have our spiritual mentoring, whatever our day holds, 7 a.m. is typically a quiet time. 7 a.m. is the time when everyone is home without obligations. So that is what we do. We meet around right here in where we're recording our podcast. This is also our studio, but we transform our living room. So we sit on the couches and we discuss things. We put the phones down. It's hilarious to hear the sisters be like to each other, "Put your phone down. What are you doing?"
Family time. Put your phone down.
I'm just looking at my calendar, and they're on each other about that.
I'm just texting my boyfriend.
Yeah, and then they're gonna get it if they say that. But yeah, so we police each other. So that is for us. Family meetings probably happen, I would say, 5 to 6 times a week.
Yeah,
I think I can safely say that honestly. We usually, ironically enough, miss family meetings on Sundays.
Yep.
We have to leave very early to set up our church in a high school. So we're a mobile church, so we leave pretty early. And that means that at 7, we're usually getting ready.
But typically on Sunday, it's not necessarily family meeting, but that is the day where we're most likely to have a meal together around the table. Mm-hmm. And so not necessarily a family meeting, but we're still having that family time.
Mm-hmm. And oftentimes we discuss what we either taught in church or received in church as a lesson.
So, but my answer to this question would be, when I'm talking to you, and you would ask, because the question was, how often do you have? So here's I'm going to reverse that question to how often should I have a family meeting with my family? And I would say as often as possible.
That's what I was going to say.
As often as possible. If you miss a day, don't beat yourself up. If you go a week and you say, you know what, we really haven't, then I would make it more of a priority. But I would just say as often as possible for your family. Try to figure out. And some of you have very complicated schedules where husband and wife, they work opposite shifts.
Yep. And
your kids are running here and there and everywhere. We get that. Mm-hmm. So there shouldn't be any guilt about it. It's just, how often can I? And there are times where Lysandra has a family meeting with the kids, and that's what they do. There's times where I have a family meeting with just the girls because Lysandra's off painting or whatever else. And so you may have to do that where literally not everybody's present, but we're still having that time together. So as often as you can, that's how I would encourage you to have yours. All right. And then along this same line, last question we want to share with you before we end today's episode. What do family meetings look like with young kids with short attention spans?
They look short.
Yes. Well, and I would say it's not necessarily just young kids that have short attention spans either, but
yeah, sometimes it's the teenagers and
parents.
Yeah, you have to pry the phones out of people's hands.
Because typically for us, Dad has a short attention span.
Well, you go off the rails pretty quick, but
yeah, I do. But I think that's one of the reasons why the kids enjoy family meetings so much.
Yes. So what we say to this one is make family meetings appropriate for your children at whatever age they are. Family meetings do not have to be all conversation, all Bible study, and super long. They can be one single Bible verse that we're going to discuss for a few minutes, and you can play a game. You can go around the room and talk and just have fun, like just be goofy. Family meetings do not need to be somber.
Right, you're not using Robert's Rules of Order to have a family meeting. It's like,
yeah, please don't do that.
We're just spending time as a family, and we're discussing and we're connecting. Sometimes it is serious, like we have some serious topics we need to discuss based upon what's going on in our lives or the lives of the people that we're closely connected to. But that's not the case for most of our conversations. It's share a Bible verse. It's maybe pray together. It's what's going on in your schedule, what's going on right now, anything I can help you with. And so we're hitting a variety of topics and subjects, and we're kind of keeping things moving, and it's often very fun. Our kids look forward to it.
Yeah.
And so whether you have young kids, older kids, or maybe it's your spouse or you that has a hard time like paying attention, you're just quickly changing the conversation. And that helps to bring people in too. So
I'll share what our family meetings looked like when our kids were little. So we had a 1-year-old and then a 3, 4, and 5-year-old. So imagine what that would be like, right?
That's chaos and fun all the time.
Very little girls. So everybody would have their baths, brush their teeth, get their jammies on. And I should say we would brush their teeth.
Yes, we would.
Their baths, put their jammies on.
Yeah.
And then we'd all climb into our bed. And that we would go over one Bible verse that was so simple, like children obey your parents.
We might sing a little children's Bible song or something like that.
They love singing Jesus Loves Me and all the little songs. So we might sing a song, and then we would each go around the room and take turns praying. And the prayers that they prayed were so adorable and so cute and so bizarre.
Yeah.
But they were learning to pray. And then we would end with prayer. And then usually Daddy would have like a little wrestle fight and start. Yeah. Like, what's that called where you put them up on your shoulder and then bomb them down?
Body slam them and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, body slam them.
Power bombs.
And so as he's body slamming this one, the other toddler comes up and climbs on his back behind here, tries to choke him out. And it was like that every single night. So that was what our family meetings looked like. Yeah, we'd have the serious side, but then there'd be like bedtime wrestling.
Yeah.
So, I mean...
Or bedtime story time.
Yeah, where mom always ends up being this poop monster of the story.
Yes. That's right.
They loved that so much. They still talk about that.
But that's the thing. We did the serious. We did the spiritual. But we also made it fun, so our kids looked forward to it.
They wanted to come.
It was never, oh no, they're calling for a family meeting.
Nope.
What's the bad thing that's happened now? It's just like, no, we're coming together as a family to connect and have fun. And yes, sometimes they're serious and there's often a spiritual focus. But just figure out what works best for your family. And that's the thing. As often as you can, and what works best for your family, whether that's time frame, subject matter, and all that. So, family meeting idea tonight. All right. And this is going back to a lot of the discussions we've talked about, because a lot of these questions had to do with a very similar idea, although maybe worded a little different way, focused a little bit different way. But I want you to stop and just literally think about, what do you think the like a good parent looks like? And maybe you're more specific. And this is a conversation you can have as a spouse. You can have it as a family. Let's start with dad. All right, what do we think a good dad looks like? Like, what makes up a good dad? So as a dad, I'm going to have my own input. Lysandra would have her own input of what a good dad looks like. I'm asking my kids, no matter what age they are. I'm just interested. What do you think a good dad does? How do they sound? And all those sorts of things. And just having that conversation to think about what is a good dad. All right, then good mom. All right, you've got siblings. You've got kids. First of all, what does a good child look like? What does a good sister look like? Good brother? And you're just having this conversation about what does that look like? Okay, how can we do that? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the family meeting I want you to talk about. It's just, hey, each of us becoming the best whatever we can possibly be in our family.
Mm-hmm. Sounds great. Thanks for joining us today. Please go and subscribe to the Family Meeting Podcast from your favorite podcast provider. And if you found this information helpful, please share this episode on social media and invite your friends and family to listen in with you.
To find more content and information Lysandra and I provide, you can go to our website, familymeeting.org, or email us at info@familymeeting.org. If you'd like to shoot us a text or call us, you can send a voice message at 904-257-3062.
Mm-hmm. And we want to invite you to join us for our next family meeting as we look at This Isn't Working. Maybe you've said that before, where the style of your family, the dynamic in your family, the way your marriage is going, it's not working.
The schedule, the pace, whatever it is.
It's not working. How can we change? You know the definition of insanity, right? It's doing the same thing over and over and expecting
Webster's
different
dictionary
results.
says
I did not say
insanity
Webster's
is-
dictionary. The dictionary did not even come into play. Do you know who is actually attributed to this quote, although you can't prove it?
No.
Einstein.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I don't know
Nice.
if he actually said it or not. But it's doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So how can you change? If you feel like something in your marriage, something in your family isn't working, how do you change it? What can you do? So we are going to talk about that next week.
And I'm pretty sure Lysandra will have Webster's dictionary tell us what insanity is. Do you know what Webster said about it?
No, I do not.
Okay, you're kind of curious now, though,
I'm
aren't you?
absolutely going to look it up as soon as
I
we're done
knew
with
it.
this. Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us today for this family meeting. Have a great week, everybody. This meeting is adjourned.
All right. Well, those were good questions, right, guys?
Great questions.
Man.
We appreciate those questions coming in.
So good. And maybe you thought of a question that kind of based on something here that we said, or maybe you've got your own that you've been kind of pondering but didn't want to share. Please share with us your questions. We want to help you. And your questions can help somebody else. Maybe
Yes.
somebody else will jump on and answer your question for you based on their experience. So share with us those parenting questions. Parenting is a hard journey, man. It is tough. There's not enough books on it. There's not enough training. It's kind of an on-the-job training situation. So don't be afraid to ask your questions. We want to hear from you.
Well, and we often feel so alone as parents. And we often feel like nobody else knows. They don't understand my family dynamic. We don't want people to know what our family's really like because we're kind of embarrassed about what our kids are doing or how we react or whatever else. Listen, we're all just trying to do the best we can. We all make mistakes. We all want to learn and grow. And what I love about this community is we have an opportunity to connect, to help each other, to learn from each other. We're not just here to share with you what we think. We want to learn from you as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So as you listen to this and you're like, hey, that's really a good thought, but this is my experience and this is what I think would be a help to that person in that situation. Hey, put it in the comments. We want to hear from you. We want to learn from you. And we want to know what your story is. And that's what this is about, learning and growing together. We thank you for being a part of this community and for investing in the other parents in our community. So
thanks for joining us. Have a great day.